Welcome. Thanks for taking a few minutes to learn about our behavior slips and how we use them here at Victor School. Here are some of the questions that we're hoping to help you answer today. What are the two kinds of behavior slips? When do you use each kind? How do you fill them out? What do you do with a minor behavior slip? What do you do with a major behavior slip? And what does the office do with a major behavior slip? So how do I decide when to use a minor or a major behavior slip? The best thing that you can do is to check your Victor School behavior definitions and the active response flowchart. Both of these were given out at the beginning of the school year, and there are plenty of copies if you need more from the PBIS team. These will help you to determine whether the behavior itself is minor or major. Remember that you can find all of the behaviors from both slips listed with the definitions, minor examples, and major examples. The more familiar you are with these examples, the less you'll need to physically refer back to them. Either way, though, the examples are there to guide you in making your choices. So in a few moments, we're going to take a look at what to do with a minor behavior slip as well as a major behavior slip. And we'll be using the property misuse category to fill in our minor behavior slip. And we'll be using the property damage or vandalism category to fill out a major behavior slip. Feel free to refer back to this part of the video to reference these behavior examples if you need to, or you can use your own copy of the behavior definitions. So once you determine whether a behavior is major or minor using those definitions, you can use the flowchart to help you reference what to do next. If the behavior is minor, it doesn't always warrant a behavior slip right away. It is recommended that you try a classroom intervention first before writing a behavior slip for minor problem behaviors. These are located on the left side of the flowchart. These include just basic things that we already do in our classrooms, oftentimes, whether it's a redirect to a seat using positive incentives to help change behavior. You can modify assignments. Things along those lines are all included in there. If these practices aren't helping change the behavior, then you might write a minor behavior slip. Once a student has 3 minor behavior slips for the same behavior, then a major behavior slip at this point should be written. And then we're going to move over to the right side of the flowchart. This side is for minor behaviors that have had 3 slips and are now major behaviors, or they are problem behaviors or target behaviors that are deemed serious enough to be major on their own. Once you determine that a major behavior has occurred, the first action is to write a major behavior slip. Once that is filled out, the student takes it to the office, and the next step is for the administrator to determine the appropriate consequences. This is when the principal will talk with the student in the office. Sometimes they'll discuss with a parent. Sometimes they will have the student do things at school that some kind of consequence in the classroom or at recess. Things like that. So once that slip is filled out by the administrator and they've determined those consequences, that's when the administrator will go ahead and follow through on those consequences. And then ultimately they'll send the slip back filled out as much as possible to that point to the teacher. That way you have feedback on what happened and what it is that happened up in the office. So let's try filling out a minor behavior slip using an example here. So this morning during math time, Mrs. Viramontes noted that Joseph had scribbled on his desk with a pencil. He had Joseph clean off the table with a wet rag and there was no permanent damage. So she decided that Joseph was misusing school property and she would write a minor behavior slip that would go home with Joseph. So she started by filling out the student's name and his grade, as well as her own name and the date and time of the incident. She quickly marked property misuse as the problem behavior and that it occurred in the classroom. She then decided that she thought Joseph might have done this because he was trying to avoid his work, so she marked the avoid task or activities box in the perceived motivation section. Because she had Joseph clean up the writing, she decided that the action taken was restitution, and since she noticed the behavior herself, she then marked teacher for the others involved in incident section. Finally, she quickly noted what had happened in the comments section. In this section, it's very important that you list what was observable as opposed to things or words that might be miscommunicated at later points. It's better to just give the facts rather than the analysis, as they might say. So then at this point, she asked Joseph to sign his name right away, and then she tore off the white copy to take up to the PBIS box in the office. She then tore off the yellow copy to keep for her own personal teacher records. And then she sent the pink copy home with a student to get a parent signature. By doing this, the school and the teacher both have a record of the problem behavior. And then after the signed pink copy is returned back to school with a signature, the teacher can then choose to return it to the parent as they see fit. So making sure that those signatures get on there and that everybody has the communication they need. So now let's take a look at a major behavior slip. It's a little bit larger, so we're going to have to look at it in two parts. The form should still only take a short amount of time to complete, however, because we want staff to be able to complete these quickly and easily. So let's look at the top portion first, and then after that we'll look at the bottom portion, even though this is one form together. So here's the scenario. Little Joseph has gotten himself into trouble again. Mrs. Viramontes has already written 3 minor behavior slips because he wrote on the tables, once with a pencil and then 2 other times with markers at this point. So after recess today, Joseph took a marker and actually decided to write on the smartboard screen with it. Mrs. Viramontes knew that it was the 3rd time talking to the student about the same behavior, so she got out a major behavior slip. She filled out all but the signatures, and then afterwards she had the student go to the office to talk to the principal, and she planned on having Joseph help to clean off the board during the afternoon recess. So she started filling out the major behavior slip form by writing again the student's name and grade. She then wrote her own name on the referring staff line, and then the date and the time. She chose classroom under the location section. And since writing on the smartboard with a marker fell under defacing property, she then marked this in the problem behaviors category. Then Mrs. Viramontes decided that she believes that Joseph did what he did to get both adult and peer attention, so she marked both boxes in the perceived motivation section. So as she moved to the bottom of the form, she noted that the action she took would be restitution by marking restitution, as well as time in the office, because she was going to be sending Joseph up to the office to meet with the principal. She then filled in the comment section with both the problem behavior that occurred as well as the action that had been taken afterward. And then once she finished this part of the form, she sent Joseph up to the office to meet with the principal. Before the student was sent back to class, the principal signed the form and then tore off the pink portion, which eventually becomes PBIS records and goes in the PBIS box. And then she sent it back to the teacher with the student. And then once the teacher had it, they tore off the yellow copy for their own records. And then they sent home the white copy for parents to sign and be returned the next day. In this way, the principal and the teacher, again, both have a record of the slip before it goes home to parents, just in case it never comes back. So here are some examples of a couple of things that can help you sort of clarify when to use a minor or a major slip. So for example, a student might receive 1 minor behavior slip for being defiant this week, and then they receive 2 more minor behavior slips for the same problem behavior the next week. This means that if the student repeats the same behavior again, then they would get a major behavior slip instead of a minor behavior slip. Okay, continuing. Here is another example. A student receives a minor behavior slip for physical aggression on the playground. Then the next week, the same student receives another minor behavior slip for a different problem behavior, which would maybe be disruption in the classroom. Finally, later that week, they receive a 3rd minor behavior slip for being disrespectful to noon staff. And even though the student received 3 minor behavior slips, they weren't for the same behavior, so the student would not receive a major behavior slip just for these. 3